Our skies are full of mysteries. Unidentified flying objects secretly investigated by government agencies all over Europe for decades.
There has been, and indeed still is, I think, great secrecy about UFOs and also a reluctance to talk about this subject.
For the first time, we've collated sightings and reports from across an entire continent.
The governments of Europe were taking the subject of UFOs very, very seriously because some of their people were seeing these things in the sky.
Some experts insist many sightings have rational explanations.
Often you can take even the most spectacular UFO sighting and find that behind it is a very earthly explanation.
But some continue to defy understanding.
That's an object that flies, and I don't know what it is.
Are these visitors from other worlds or natural phenomena? And do our European governments know more than they ever revealed to us? The answer may lie in the untold stories of the UFO files of Europe. For decades, governments across Europe have been keeping files on UFO sightings. To this day, a handful of these cases remain unexplained. A pilot mysteriously vanishes after being scrambled to intercept an unidentified aircraft. In a Sicilian village, a series of inexplicable fires. Residents speculate that they could be linked to UFOs. A flying saucer investigated at the highest levels of British government. At the height of the Cold War, more than 300,000 US troops are stationed across Europe. They're on alert against hostile action by the Soviet bloc. Along the British coast, the RAF is nervously watching the skies. Against this backdrop, one of the UK's most dramatic UFO cases occurs. RAF Binbrook, 8th of September, 1970. American pilot Captain Schaffner flies out over the North Sea in search of an unidentified flying object, then disappears without trace.
The tragic death of Captain William Schaffner is one of the most intriguing stories that's ever been associated with the UFO mystery. If the central allegation proved to be true, that the pilot was lost following an encounter with a UFO, clearly this would be an issue of the most severe magnitude.
Journalist and academic Dave Clark obtained access to the files, which were to become known as the case of the missing pilot.
On a dark and stormy night in September 1970, RAF and the Americans were very concerned about something that they'd seen on their radars.
An urgent call comes into RAF Binbrook. An unknown target, believed to be Soviet, is flying off the east coast. The order goes out. Scramble a Lightning jet to intercept.
A United States Air Force exchange officer called William Schaffner, Captain William Schaffner, and he was a Vietnam veteran. He got lots of flying hours on his career, and he was the natural person to go out there.
Get ready for launch.
Schaffner was sent out over the North Sea. He made contact with ground control who were watching this thing on radar.
Captain Schaffner makes visual contact and pushes on to make the interception. Control warns him to keep a sharp lookout, but it's too late. They've lost all contact with his aircraft.
And that was the end of it. No more heard from Captain Schaffner. Eventually they found Captain Schaffner's Lightning jet at the bottom of the North Sea, and when they opened up the cockpit, no sign of Captain Schaffner.
For almost 22 years, the RAF classifies the incident as a tragic accident. Until an anonymous source comes forward with astonishing information suggesting a UFO was involved.
Nothing else then happened until 1992, when out of the blue, someone who claimed to be an RAF crash investigator walked into the offices of the Grimsby Evening Telegraph newspaper and asked to see a journalist. So this person then started saying, I was a member of the crash investigations team, it's been 22 years and I want to now tell you the truth about what happened.
The source claims that the RAF had mounted a secret operation that autumn to deal with a raft of unexplained sightings, and that the UFO involved in Schaffner's disappearance could not have been a Russian aircraft.
They're watching this thing, it's moving at incredible speeds, and they press the scramble button. And apparently these things have been seen not just on the night that this happened, but on previous nights as well.
The anonymous source provides a crucial piece of evidence, a transcript of the conversation between Captain Schaffner and ground control, unreleased by the Ministry of Defense until now. Nick Pope is former head of the MOD's UFO desk.
In this transcript, you hear this story unfolding of how he's trying to intercept this UFO, how the UFO is moving rapidly, he's vectoring towards it, the UFO then maneuvers, and this game of cat and mouse is taking place.
He reported seeing a very bright light, almost like a cone-shaped object, so bright it was sort of burning his eyes, and he could also see what appeared to be like a snooker ball, a glass ball-shaped object that was trailing behind this object that was flying low and slow over the North Sea. He was closing in to do the interception, and that's the point at which contact with ground control was lost, and his lightning disappeared from ground control radar screens.
According to the transcript, ground control's final calls to Schaffner's plane are greeted with silence. His plane disappears off radar, and all contact is lost. His aircraft is later recovered, but the body has vanished.
The one really mysterious thing about the wreckage was, when they lifted the aircraft from the seabed, the cockpit was closed, but no Captain Schaffner. The body of the pilot, nowhere to be found. No reports of missing bodies turning up on beaches or anything of that kind, so real mystery.
The new evidence leads to speculations of an RAF cover-up. The story is picked up by the press and makes headlines. Suspicions are raised that an alien abduction has taken place. If Captain Schaffner didn't eject and he didn't die in the crash, how could he possibly escape from the plane and then close the canopy before disappearing?
It's as if the body was somehow beamed out of the cockpit.
In 2003, 11 years after the anonymous source came forward, the Ministry of Defense finally declassifies the RAF Board of Inquiry report into Captain Schaffner's death. Nick Pope decides to investigate the case himself.
I looked into these allegations very carefully. Clearly, it was the matter of the utmost severity if a UFO incident had been responsible for the loss of a life. What actually emerged was a very different story to the allegations that I had heard.
The released MOD files explain the real story and proved that the transcript and the entire leaked UFO mystery had been faked. The first question these files solve is why Schaffner's squadron had been scrambled that fateful night.
During the height of the Cold War, the number of intercepts that took place were quite numerous, up to 3 or 4 times a week in occasions. The Russians were coming down, they were testing our defences the whole time. We were sort of having to respond to that. Things really did get quite tense here at times.
However, the operational Air Force records show that on the week in question, there were no instances where jets were scrambled. What the record does show is that Captain Schaffner was taking part in an exercise at night. It's called a tachyval, a tactical evaluation.
The point of the exercise is to simulate a Soviet invasion of the UK's airspace and to test how quickly the pilots can scramble. No advance warning is given, which leads to an air of mystery surrounding this event.
Obviously, we don't exercise with the Soviets, so what we did was we got a Royal Air Force aircraft to play the part of an intruding Soviet aircraft.
So the target in question this night is an RAF aircraft on a training exercise, not a mysterious UFO. The transcript from the anonymous source had been faked.
There's no UFO here, there's no cover-up. The leaked transcript telling this fictitious tale of a UFO interception is completely bogus. More than that, this was, to my mind, despicable. This was a tragic accident in which a pilot had lost his life doing his duty. The suggestion that somehow there was a UFO encounter here, that somehow the Ministry of Defence and the Air Force had covered this up. Not only are those allegations bogus, they're extremely distressing to Captain Schaffner's family.
So what exactly did make Schaffner's Lightning aircraft plunge into the depths of the North Sea? The official radio transcript, released with the MOD files, provides clues.
What happened on the night in question is the fighter controller spoke to Captain Schaffner and said, "This is where the aircraft is, go and find it." It's a stressful situation, it's dark, there's an aircraft out there somewhere, and he's got to find it.
Once Captain Schaffner tracks down the plane, he finds it's a slow-flying Shackleton aircraft. And now, his problems begin.
So what you've got is a situation where Captain Schaffner is having to fly his aircraft almost at the absolute minimum speed that he's able to do safely, just to stay up with this aircraft. At night, over the sea, it's extremely difficult to judge where the horizon is, and if you lose sight of it for just a second, it can be fatal.
A conversation ensued in which he was talking to ground control. He was saying he could identify a set of lights and he was closing. He was going to try and turn his aircraft in order to slow himself down, which is a very tricky manoeuvre at low altitude.
There is also another Lightning aircraft in the area, watching as events unfold.
There's a statement from the other Lightning crew who'd just been relieved, and they both saw Captain Schaffner turning his aircraft in order to try and slow himself down, and at that point the lights on the aircraft disappeared. That was the moment the Board of Inquiry decided was the moment that his Lightning hit the North Sea.
But what happened to Schaffner's body? It isn't with the aircraft and is never recovered.
When you actually read the accident report, what we discover is that there were a whole series of blunders that led to this pilot's death. The gun that should have blown the cockpit off had been incorrectly serviced, nobody's fault, it didn't work. So the only way to escape would be to manually motor the cockpit open, which it appears he did. So at some point he managed to open the cockpit, managed to get out. As the aircraft sank, the cockpit closed through hydraulic pressure, so he was left in the North Sea, no protection, no life raft. He would have died within minutes, and his body has never been found.
All of which leaves one last mystery: the identity of the source who contacted the newspaper and their motivation for creating the idea of a UFO alien abduction.
Some people just like hoaxing other people just for the fun of it, just to show how clever they are.
(2004). A Sicilian fishing village experiences a series of shocking events. A fireball is observed, shooting out of the ocean, and glowing UFOs are spotted, moving across the horizon.
Considerate che questa è una zona ricca di avvistamenti, di segnalazioni, molta gente ha segnalato avvistamenti di UFO.
But events rapidly descend into chaos. Over the space of weeks, electrical appliances spontaneously combust, causing a series of mysterious house fires.
E questo poi cominciò a farci capire che eravamo di fronte a un qualcosa più di non tanto normale.
The Italian government records more than 400 incidents in the village. Residents are ordered to evacuate. And as investigations begin, the truth appears stranger than villagers ever imagined.
Quindi siamo ancora ad una fase in cui la scienza non è in condizione di dare risposte precise a questi interrogativi.
Caneto di Caronia, Sicily, January 2004. 4 a.m. and a local fisherman is working in the bay. Suddenly, a dazzling object bursts through the water. Within seconds, the object disappears. The witness can't understand what has happened. The fisherman no longer discusses his terrifying encounter, but the story is well known to residents of the village. Local resident Nino Pezzino recounts the incident.
Mi ha detto, sai, stamattina quando andavo al mare per andare a pescare ho visto una specie di una palla di fuoco che usciva dal mare e nella frazione di qualche attimo è scomparsa.
And the same sighting is backed up by another witness in the village.
Questa cosa l'ho un po' recepita, ma la cosa strana è che la stessa mattina, un pochino più tardi, mi incontra una signora che abita qua vicino e questa signora mi dice, ma lo sai che stamattina alle 4 ho visto, per cui c'erano due persone che alla stessa ora avevano visto la stessa cosa e sono due persone che non hanno nessuna affinità tra l'una con l'altra. Ecco perché dico.
But it soon emerges that this sighting isn't the first mysterious event to happen in the village. Niccolo Marinaro is a retired journalist who worked for the Vatican in Rome. He encountered a similar phenomenon in Caneto in the 1970s.
E vedo così come una piccola pallina, ma una pallina di pochi centimetri ad occhio naturalmente, forse 20 centimetri, rossa, lontanissima. Questa pallina si muoveva, io l'ho guardata un istante incuriosito, l'ho riguardata di nuovo e vedeva che continuava a camminare.
The ball suddenly swells in size, dominating the night sky.
Molto grande, forse delle dimensioni di un palazzo di 5 piani, diciamo sicuramente oltre i 20-30 metri, direi, come diametro.
After hovering for 20 seconds, it quickly disappears over the horizon.
Tutto, è rimasto tutto nel buio, senza un rumore, senza assolutamente niente.
So what are these strange fireballs? Aviation and security analyst Chris Yates believes nighttime sightings of unusual phenomena can easily confuse witnesses.
It's very difficult at night to determine what you're seeing at a distance, and when you see something like a red flare pop up, particularly over water, then it's difficult to identify precisely what that is. What it could have been is, for example, a distress flare being fired off. These are red. They appear for just a few minutes. They pop up into the sky and to indicate that you're somebody in distress.
And Yates believes that busy coastal waters can often be dazzling to the untrained eye.
We've all from time to time stood on the shoreline somewhere in the world looking out to sea at dead of night, and yes, we do see lights oftentimes in the distance as ships track backwards and forwards.
Even an experienced fisherman can misidentify the lights of a large ship.
He may well have been tired. He may well have mistaken the navigation light atop the mast on a vessel some distance away as some strange object in the sky, and put 3 and 3 together and come up with a 7.
There may even be an astronomical explanation for the red lights that were observed.
If I saw a red light coming out of the sea, my first thought as an astronomer would be the planet Mars. That comes around close to the Earth every 2 years, and when it does, it's brighter than any of the stars in the sky, and it shines with a steady glow. It really looks quite unlike any other star, so that would be my best bet.
However, in 2004, numerous light phenomena are observed in Caneto. Local resident Antonino Spinato is convinced that what he saw cannot be explained so easily.
Al che ho guardato queste luci intensamente e ho visto che ho pensato stelle non sono, barche non sono, perché ed erano a un'altezza che non potevano essere né stelle né barche.
Spinato has seen the phenomena on more than 20 separate occasions since 2004. Once, he claims, it appeared to be tracking a light aircraft over the mountains.
Incuriosito ovviamente da queste aliante che già avevo visto altre volte, ho voluto fare delle foto pensando che dietro l'aliante o davanti all'aliante ci fosse un qualcosa che lo seguisse.
But only when he checks the photos 3 days later does he realize what he caught on film.
Vado sul computer e mi scarico le foto di quel giorno, al che noto nello schermo questa luce che andava da un punto all'altro.
Had Spinato captured the mysterious lights on camera? Photography expert Paul Ellis is suspicious of the pale light on the image.
The white light in the centre, to my mind, instantly makes me think of a lens aberration. Any natural bright light source, if you aim your camera straight into it, those beams of photons are going straight into your lens, and some of them, particularly if the lens isn't of the best quality, can sort of bounce around inside, hitting the elements and cause these strange sort of effects on the negative or on the silicon sensor.
Spinato's photographs proved inconclusive, and the UFO reports may be forgotten forever if it wasn't for the shocking events in the village that same year that add a dark, dramatic twist to the story.
Le case vennero evacuate, la gente fu mandata via, tutta la zona fu posta sotto sequestro.
Caneto is about to become the center of a major government investigation that will put this tiny fishing village on the UFO map forever.
Fuori, fuori.
Caneto di Carogna, Sicily. A tiny fishing village is the epicenter of various sightings of mysterious lights spanning more than 30 years.
Questa pallina si muoveva, io l'ho guardata un istante incuriosito, l'ho riguardata di nuovo e vedeva che continuava a camminare.
But by 2004, events escalate into something that will force the Italian government to take drastic action.
hanno indotto le autorità e in particolare la protezione civile a ordinare lo sgombero delle abitazioni, l'evacuazione dell'intera frazione di Canneto di Caronia.
Local resident Nino Pezzino is the first to encounter the strange phenomenon. On the 23rd of December 2003, wiring at his home is damaged by what at first is thought to be a short circuit.
Il tutto inizia a casa mia, ho chiamato l'elettricista, abbiamo controllato l'impianto, non c'era niente, poi è risuccesso ancora fino a quando poi abbiamo scoperto che comunque non era un problema legato ai nostri impianti, ma era qualcosa di diverso.
In January 2004, the same month as the fisherman's mysterious fireball sighting, more spontaneous fires occur at electrical connections throughout the village.
Poteva avvenire, per cui per un po' di giorni c'è stata questa fase che comunque c'era un problema sull'impianto elettrico.
To combat the potentially life-threatening situation, the power company tried to resolve the problem.
Poi hanno tolto l'energia elettrica e ci siamo accorti che dopo qualche giorno sono ritornati questi fenomeni e realmente non c'era energia elettrica.
Even with no power supplied to Canneto, the mysterious fires continue. Before long, the media descend on the village, eager to report and investigate the bizarre events. Journalist Sergio Granata arrives at Canneto in February 2004.
E proprio quando arrivammo qui la situazione precipitò nel giro di qualche ora. Praticamente dai contatori si passò agli incendi all'interno delle case. La cosa strana è che tutta la zona, tutto il quartiere che c'è qui alle mie spalle, era senza corrente elettrica.
The disturbing events are even captured in this dramatic news footage. Fearing for their safety, residents remove all electrical appliances from their homes. But what happens next deepens the mystery further.
Lì abbiamo invece scoperto poi che quando non c'era niente più di elettrico cominciava a prendere fuoco il divano, i materassi. C'erano all'interno queste molle, queste spirali, prendevano fuoco i materassi e poi tutto quello che c'era, plastica e metallo, prendeva fuoco. E questo poi cominciò a farci capire che eravamo di fronte a un qualcosa più di non tanto normale.
As the fires escalate in size and scale, police are called in to investigate.
I contatori. Nel giro di 2 o 3 giorni tutto cambiò, cominciarono gli incendi, cominciarono i problemi seri e la zona prima si popolò di esercito, di protezione civile. Tutta questa zona era piena di auto della sicurezza, di ambulanze, di vigili del fuoco.
In total, more than 400 fires and other unexplained phenomena are reported. On February the 9th, the authorities are forced to take severe action to avoid casualties. An evacuation order is issued.
Le case vennero evacuate, la gente fu mandata via, tutta la zona fu posta sotto sequestro.
Locals begin to speculate about a connection between the fires and the UFO sightings.
Durante I fenomeni di Canneto tanta gente ha visto le luci, addirittura alcuni chiamavano lingue di fuoco e hanno sottoscritto e hanno firmato dei documenti anche denunciandoli alle forze armate.
Press reports describe extraterrestrial activity in Canneto.
Ovviamente l'attenzione di tutti fu puntata sull'aspetto degli alieni, no? Che è quella più l'ipotesi più suggestiva, quella che fa vendere anche di più i giornali.
But the authorities are determined to find a scientific explanation. Following the evacuation of the village, a full inquiry into the incidents is launched. Former Civil Protection Coordinator Francesco Venerando Mantegna is in charge of the inquiry. Mantegna assembles a team of the country's top scientists. First, they consider the unique geology of the island. Less than 100 kilometers from Canneto di Caronia lies Mount Etna, Europe's largest active volcano.
E per prima cosa ho dato la disposizione di fare un'indagine di carattere geologico, geochimico, sismologico sull'intera area per vedere quali erano le possibilità che questi fenomeni fossero generati da situazioni naturali.
But surveys of the area appear to rule out a connection between volcanic activity and the unusual phenomena.
Ma in definitiva il gruppo di lavoro è arrivato a questa conclusione per il lavoro che ha svolto: l'esclusione di qualsiasi origine naturale dei fenomeni e invece la plausibilità che questo fenomeno sia stato generato, quello degli incendi in particolare, da fonti elettromagnetiche.
Da quello che si è saputo, da quello che si sa, vennero rilevati forti picchi di campi elettromagnetici, qualcosa di molto strano, di inspiegabile.
So what is this electromagnetic source? Researchers begin to study the technological infrastructure of the village.
Quindi abbiamo indagato la ferrovia, che passa proprio accanto a Canneto, l'energia elettrica, gli elettrodotti, le telecomunicazioni, tutte le antenne che trasmettono o ricevono Caronia, quelle delle televisioni, delle radio, eccetera, eccetera.
Within a 5-kilometer radius of Canneto, a full electrical survey is conducted.
Ma anche lì abbiamo potuto concludere che non c'era alcuna relazione tra i fenomeni incendiari o elettromagnetici e queste possibili fonti tecnologiche.
Investigators are left to speculate that the strange phenomenon in the village is caused by some unknown technology.
Ma la mia opinione personale rispetto agli incendi che sono stati poi la parte critica di Caronia è che siano stati effettivamente generati da una qualche sperimentazione di tecnologie nuove. Di natura industriale o di natura militare non lo sappiamo. Non siamo in condizione di rispondere a questa domanda, ma certamente una sperimentazione di origine artificiale è alla base di questo fenomeno.
But some think there are other possibilities.
Era o di una tecnologia sconosciuta dal punto di vista civile oppure di una tecnologia extraterrestre, aliena.
Investigators also consider a link between the fires and the UFOs observed over the coast.
Noi abbiamo acquisito una quantità consistente di materiale che riguarda questi oggetti soprattutto notturni, quindi sostanzialmente delle luci in movimento, o anche diurni, di oggetti.
But even Spinato's photographs are not able to provide further clues.
La qualità dell'immagine fotografica non ci ha consentito tuttora di avere un'idea precisa delle dimensioni, della qualità dei materiali che compongono questi oggetti.
Mantegna remains open-minded about the possibility of a connection between the strange lights and the fires in the village.
Sulla natura degli oggetti, ripeto, cercheremo di approfondire sempre più in futuro l'indagine, fino ad arrivare alla spiegazione più completa. Noi abbiamo detto sin dall'inizio, e lo ripeto, che non possiamo escludere nulla fin quando non si arriva ad una certezza scientifica.
The fires in Canetto stop as suddenly as they had started. And 5 months later, residents are allowed to return to their damaged homes. But they continue to seek answers to the unexplained happenings which turn their lives upside down.
Come persone che viviamo in quella borgata non vogliamo essere messi come quelle persone che comunque credono che esiste l'UFO, per cui no, noi vogliamo che lo Stato ci dia una risposta.
An RAF pilot's extraordinary encounter with an unknown flying object is confirmed on radar.
This is an incredibly important event. We've got an excellent witness. We've got the physical evidence in terms of the radar.
This pilot's testimony converts one of the British Prime Minister's closest colleagues from a skeptic into a UFO believer. It's 1952 and the start of the Cold War. As tensions rise between East and West, fear of invasion turns all eyes to the skies.
1952, the American Air Force and also the air forces in France, in Spain, in England started to get inundated with reports, not only from members of the public but from pilots.
The sudden rise in UFO sightings sends a wave of fear through Western leaders.
The governments of Europe were interested in this as well because some of their people were seeing these things in the sky, and this is what generated Winston Churchill's famous memo to his air minister: what's all this stuff about flying saucers? You know, what is the truth? You know, can I have a report?
Despite UFO reports coming from its own men, the MOD is skeptical. They dismiss the sightings as optical illusions, misidentifications, or hoaxes.
So Winston Churchill was reassured, nothing to worry about, Prime Minister, we did a full study of this subject, there's nothing going on.
Yet days after Churchill demands to know the truth, an extraordinary sighting changes everything. Oldenburg, Germany, 30th of July, 1952. At RAF Oldenburg, Sergeant Hughes takes off on a routine training flight in his de Havilland Vampire FB-9. Hughes is piloting one of 4 aircraft from number 20 Squadron, flying in formation in clear visibility.
They'd been given a vector back to Oldenburg and they were performing an oblique turn, and my father was in the number 2 position, which was below the flight leader.
Sergeant Hughes died in 2009, but had recounted this life-changing flight to his son Brian.
As they were banking, he saw this flash of light above him, which he described about the size and brightness of a star. He once held his hand up to describe how it came down, and he made it the smallest aperture he could make, so it was just like a little speck, and he was looking up, and it just all of a sudden he went. He opened his hands like that, and he was looking at this thing.
The object keeps perfect pace with Hughes's plane, allowing him to make detailed observations. His official RAF logbook records the extraordinary flying object.
He said that it was shiny metallic, absolutely seamless, which amazed him, highly reflective. He compared its surface to the shiny side of tinfoil, but without a single crease or crinkle. He was absolutely dumbfounded at what he was seeing. And then all of a sudden it went behind them, and as it did so, he said, from being a disc, it manoeuvred onto its side so he could actually see a saucer shape, and it then went and it was gone in a matter of seconds.
Shocked and stunned, Sergeant Hughes says nothing of the sighting until he returns to base.
When they had landed back at Oldenburg and they got back to the hangar, he said to the other three pilots, "Did you see that thing? It looked like a flying saucer." And none of the other three pilots had seen it.
With no other witnesses, his account might have been considered a flight of fancy if it weren't for one thing. The UFO is confirmed on radar. Hughes is summoned to an urgent meeting with the future head of the MOD, Duncan Sands.
Hughes told his story to Sandys, and Sandys believed him completely. He said this was a very serious witness, simply telling the story of what had happened to him in a no-nonsense way. This is an incredibly important event. We've got an excellent witness. We've got the physical evidence in terms of the radar. Again, there's not much middle ground with a UFO sighting like this.
But with 4 planes in the sky, why is Hughes the only witness? His son Brian believes he has the answer.
As they were banking, my father was in the number 2 position, which was below the flight leader, and my father was the only pilot that was looking upwards. You've got to bear in mind that these planes are moving at high speed, and they're about 50 yards apart from wingtip to wingtip. So the flight leader was looking forwards, and these 2 pilots would be looking down. My father's the only pilot that's actually looking upwards as they're doing this banking manoeuvre.
But what is the mysterious object? Aviation analyst Chris Yates has an intriguing theory.
We have to remember that at this time there was quite an interest in rocketry because of the fact that the United Kingdom had been under attack by V1 and V2 rockets. The British government were interested in the capability of these rockets, and yes, it could well have been one of the V2s that was seen flying through the sky on a test firing, for example.
Stockpiles of V2 rockets had previously been kept in northwest Germany. In the same region, the sighting takes place.
With the reflection of sunlight, with the atmospheric conditions at the time, and so on, could very easily have suggested to the pilot who saw it that this was something other than a rocket being fired.
Although convincing, the theory ignores some of the key features Hughes describes. In the absence of any real conclusion, the other pilots are skeptical. Hughes becomes the butt of jokes around the airbase.
Flight Lieutenant Hughes made perhaps the mistake of telling some of his Air Force colleagues about this, and he acquired the nickname Saucer Sam, and indeed someone even wrote this on the side of his aircraft on one occasion.
Sergeant Hughes' sighting may have been a joke to his colleagues, but for Aviation Minister Duncan Sands, this is no laughing matter. After hearing Hughes' story, he's transformed from a skeptic into a believer. He states, "There is, in my view, ample evidence of some unfamiliar and unexplained phenomenon." Sands goes on to make a plea to change the government's policy on UFOs. He continues, "Until some satisfactory scientific explanation can be provided, it would be most unwise to accept without further question the view that flying saucers can be dismissed as a mild form of mass hysteria." That year, the MOD begins official investigations into unidentified aircraft. Investigations that would last more than 50 years. But despite government interest, the Saucer Sam case still remains a total mystery.